Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Robin Watkins-Davis. Welcome, Robin, and great to have you with us. How are you today?
Hello, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you and delighted to be on the podcast. I'm doing really well, thank you. It's actually
Brilliant.
my evening where I am because I'm currently in Australia.
Oh my goodness, you're our second beamed in from the other side of the world guest that we've had, and in fact, you're the second day running that I've started my day with a meeting with Australia. So
There we go, we're such a global world.
such a global world, such a global podcast is Play Their Way. Well, for those listening, Robin is a yoga teacher, and in fact, when she qualified, she was the UK's youngest person to have done so. She's passionate about the outcomes of yoga, like relaxation and de stressing, but also the benefits, like added body confidence, and believes yoga is an essential part of the toolkit for getting through early adulthood. And so that brings us neatly to where we are now, Robin. With the help of a former podcast guest, Nikki Harverson, you've brought yoga into schools in the Gloucestershire area. So tell us a bit about how that started.
So it started when I was at school. I got into yoga when I was 12 and I was finding it so helpful for my own well-being, just helping with things like bullying, which was something that I went through quite a lot in primary school and then in year seven. And then my parents were divorced and things were a bit challenging at home, so I found it really helpful for navigating that. And then when I went on to do exams, I then found that I was able to apply a lot of the mindfulness and those self-care tools to manage my stress and exams, which I think then really helped with me doing well and performing well, because lots of young people just are really clever and do so well. And then when it comes to the crushing point of exams, it doesn't quite align with their actual ability. So I think it can be amazing for that. And so I just thought I really want yoga to be in schools. Like other young people should be able to do it as well. It seemed mad to me that it wasn't as part of the curriculum. And so I just started running clubs for young people. I started at my school while I was doing A levels, just running a club, and then once I could drive, I ran a couple of teen classes in Stroud and Cheltenham, and then other schools contacted me and said, "Can you come and do an assembly and chat to our students about how it's benefited you?" And it just kind of rippled out from there.
When you started doing yoga, can I ask, were you somebody who was participating in other sports? Were you a naturally sporty kid, or was yoga something that you were that was your main sporting or activity exploit outside of school?
So I wasn't the most sporty person. I think I've always enjoyed being physically active. I've probably enjoyed adventurous activities more, like being on my bike or walking. But I haven't really been big into competitive sport, and I often would shy away from like school sports days and competitive things because I think I was quite self-conscious at school with PE, and I would always be quite aware of if my peers are going to laugh at the way you run or just all of that stuff that goes on when you're at school. So I found yoga was a space where I didn't have any of those worries or thoughts.
Have you noticed that the young people who've taken up yoga under your tutelage have been similar? They've not necessarily been kids who've played hockey or netball at school or football or rugby, but they've wanted to have a pursuit that kept them active, but wasn't within those pretty tight lines of what's prescribed in school curriculums now.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. But there's a mixture of people. There's some people that go to it because they are really sporty and they want to stretch out and maybe prevent injuries. Um, but also there's a lot of people that it's actually maybe their main physical activity that they do, and they so that's really great to be able to open that up, because I think it's a shame at school if you're only given a few options, and so then you just develop this mindset of, oh, sport's not for me, I don't like exercising. But if we can have other options like yoga and things like that, then just for people to just enjoy caring for themselves.
We talk a lot within Play Their Way about choice, voice, and journey. They're the three pillars of what this is all about. And that self autonomy and self determination of young people is really important. It seems to me, from your experiences, that yoga fits in really well there, because we know that a big part of participation drop off in schools is to do with kids not wanting to compete in sports or feeling more awkward. Has yoga felt like a more natural space for a broader church of kids, in your opinion?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the one obstacle with yoga that I do want to target at the moment is something that I'm working with Active Gloucestershire on, though, is making it a more inclusive space for young boys and men, because I think the way that yoga is marketed, it's all sort of yummy mummies in leggings, and you think that you have to be really flexible. Um, so yes, I would say that it can be a really welcoming space, and with my company Shift, I try to make sure that our branding shows people of all different shapes and sizes, and that literally anyone, no matter who you are, can do yoga, because that is the fundamental truth, is absolutely everyone can. But I think it's just about finding the right space for you within that, because there are some studios that maybe are just marketing to a particular person. Um, so yeah, I think it is, but I think there's still work to do in making it more accessible for everyone.
Well, I'll tell you what, Robin, I know a number of Gloucestershire rugby players and Gloucester Premiership rugby players who are very dependent on yoga. So maybe we can get them involved to spread that message that it isn't just for yummy mummies, it's for boys and men as well.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
I think we'll make sure we do that when this podcast is finished. The one thing that I'm really intrigued by is I love yoga now as an adult, and I can feel its benefits instantly because of that relaxation and the mindfulness. But I can't imagine being a teenager and doing it with my peers and taking it all that seriously. Do you find it difficult to keep students on message, or have we seen a generational shift now? Are youngsters buying into this a lot more?
Yeah, I think there's a mixture of both. So if young people are choosing to come, for example, it's a after school club, then they they do take it really seriously. And I've been so amazed since I did my community classes when I was in my late teens, how many of the people that came to those classes have now gone on and actually done their yoga training as well. Um, so I think people do take it seriously, but also sometimes you can go into a school, and if you're just teaching a whole generic class, you do have to think about approaching it in a specific way, because often at school it's not necessarily an environment where we're completely off guard and relaxed. There is a culture of caring about what our peers think, wanting to fit in, wanting to belong. And so I think it's important when you're teaching yoga in schools to bear that in mind. So lots of the movements that I adapt in secondary school are to make young people feel confident and good in their body, especially around their peers when they might feel like their peers are watching them. Because you got to think with yoga poses that some of the you're maybe you're upside down, like downward facing dog, and you've got your hips in the air, and those kind of poses might not actually feel that great for young people in schools. So it's thinking about being really specific about what are you choosing to teach so that young people can feel safe and relaxed doing this. Um, so yeah, I think there's definitely an art to sharing it with young people so that they do engage in it and they don't just laugh and think this is so silly and feel
With that in
self-conscious.
mind, with that in mind, is your is the yoga that you're instructing here more focused on movement or breathing and mindfulness? Because if you're excluding certain movements because it makes absolute sense why you would, and you're ending up doing a lot more child's pose and warrior 3 and stuff like that, is it that you're focusing more on this kind of mindfulness, and I know that you spoke at the beginning about how helpful that was for you. Is that the kind of main outcome and aim for you through yoga for young people?
So, yeah, I definitely a big focus is the breathing and the mindfulness because I think those tools you can really take into your everyday life. And that's where the practice becomes so much more than just stretching on a mat, which some people do think yoga just is stretching. But actually, it's about learning a set of tools that you can use to bring greater awareness of yourself and then regulate your emotions, your thoughts, so you can navigate our world, which is filled with ups and downs. Um, so ultimately, I think it's actually teaching people to become mature, to become adults, really, because that is what because learning to be an adult is all about, is being able to have that awareness and think how can I best support myself in this time with what's going on. Um, I feel like I'm going a little bit sidetracked off your question. Could
No, I absolutely love it. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to hear about. And you talked at the beginning about your own personal experiences of going through bullying and parents separating, and why yoga was helpful for you. As an instructor now, are you seeing those same outcomes? Are you able to look at students and see where those things that you were tooled with helped you? Are you now seeing students experience the same things?
yeah, yeah, lots of students say that they find it really transformative for not just navigating school stress and anxiety, but also giving them more confidence, being able to be kind and compassionate, because mindfulness teaches us how to be more compassionate and kind. So it can be really helpful in schools for things like anti-bullying and I think as well the with social media, there's a whole nother layer of constantly needing to validate ourselves to external sources. So if we can connect back into ourselves and use yoga and mindfulness for that, it can be so helpful for navigating that challenge.
Do you find that yoga can be a great leveler as well with young people? I know that you can have, and I see it in where I train and our yoga classes, that you could be the most athletic trainer, but actually it comes to yoga and they're not necessarily going to be the most natural at it straight away because they have more limited flexibility or, in oftentimes, less patience.
Yeah,
Have you found that it's actually there are students who surprise themselves with how poor they are initially, or how difficult they find it, and then there are students who actually take to it very quickly and are surprised because they're not necessarily the most sporty in their class normally?
yeah, that's so true. Um, it's also one of those practices where I say to people, you can't be good at it and you can't be bad at it because it's not a competitive sport, I guess. I'd say it's more of like a lifestyle or an art form where it's just about connecting to yourself and maybe you create some goals within yourself of, okay, I want to try and be able to meditate and sit for longer because I find it really difficult to sit still. So I'm going to slowly progress that way. I think it's really good to give yourself some goals to progress, but that should be coming from within as opposed to externally comparing. So it is quite an it's quite an unusual thing, I think, in our modern world to have such a introspective practice that isn't so, um, you're not comparing yourself so much to everything else around.
Obviously, Play Their Way is about self autonomy for young people, but yoga is an inherently instructor led pursuit. So, how do you make sure that you have student buy in and that they're enjoying it? Where do you get the feedback from with these young people?
So we do it in a few ways of check in, check out, um, little surveys. So because we work with primary and secondary schools. In primary schools, it might just even be them circling an emoji that shows how they feel, and then they might say what their favourite exercise was. Another way that we do it is through cards. So we have a pack of cards and we actually get the young people to choose what they want to do, which techniques and movements, and they design the class. You can also get young people to teach aspects of it. So if they're coming to the classes regularly, they can break off into little groups or pairs and teach one another. Or if they've got the confidence, the whole class or group. Um, we also do it through videos, or just having chats, um, and also by reading the students' body language. So, for example, when I go into schools, and there was this one time where there was a group of boys that really didn't want to do yoga. I think the main barriers for them were wanting to be cool and feeling like yoga wasn't a very cool thing for them to be doing. So they just sat on the side and watched, and the teacher basically was saying to them, like, you can either take part or you need to leave. And I said to the teacher, like, it's fine for me, I'm happy for them to just be here in the room absorbing it, as long as they're not, too disruptive. And I let them sort of be there for about 10, 15 minutes. And then once we'd warmed up, I did a bit of a challenging arm balance called crow pose, um, where you put most of your body weight on the upper parts of your arms. And one of the boys was like, "Oh, I bet I can do that." And he came and had a go. And then he got his other friends to come and have a go. And then they stayed throughout the whole rest of the yoga class and did the relaxation with us. So I think it's also, you can do it in a bit of an informal way, as well as just actually allowing young people to just be. And I think one of the greatest things I've heard is, behavior in young people is communication. So instead of having this like really rigid right or wrong, you need to do this, I want you to do this. Instead, it's just thinking, okay, why is that person doing that? And what do they need, what journey do they need to go on to get to a more regulated place? So, like in our training, I always say to teachers, meet the students where they're at. So, if your class is hyperactive and what you want them to do is focus on a maths lesson, just saying to them, I need you to focus, stop doing that. That's not going to work. So if you want them to go to B and they're at A, then how can we take this on a journey? Okay, if they're really hyperactive, let's start off by doing something hyperactive. Let's shake out, let's get all this energy out. And then phase 2, maybe let's do some deep breaths. And then phase 3, let's learn and engage. Um, so I think, yeah, it's really important to involve young people, and I think I've been on the receiving end of that, as well as of being a young person doing yoga and then having some amazing people like Nikki Harverson who have met me where I'm at and have believed in me and given me a voice and empowered me. Um, so yeah, I think it's so important, and I love the movement that you're doing of play their way and youth voice. It's so needed.
Had you always had the intention of doing peer led classes? Because I'm so intrigued by this, certainly in a yoga environment where it is about relaxation and mindfulness. I'm amazed that you've got young children instructing others. Had that always been an intention, or is that something that's developed through time of like we say, listening to feedback from students and seeing how they want to participate in this?
Well, it happened somewhat organically when I did my teacher training when I was 16. And then I had other young people coming to the classes, and we got asked to speak at a couple of conferences in London. There's a all-party parliamentary group about bringing yoga into education, and we got asked to present to that to some lords and MPs and other conferences, and they also then went on to train. And so then I realized that there were other young people that also wanted to do that and take on a bit of a leadership role. And at school, we have prefect and head boy, head girl. So we already have those kind of leadership positions. So I was talking to Flo, who it's quite an amazing story actually, because I was her playground monitor when I was in year six and she was in reception. And then when I was running my classes when I was 17, she came along to the classes and she then um, went to the classes solidly for a few years, and then she went on to train and become the next UK's youngest yoga teacher. And so I was working with her, and I said like, oh, let's do this project and get other young people to be able to share yoga to their peers. And the main driving force for that was I was thinking that teenagers don't really want to necessarily listen to adults. Whereas I think that's why my teen classes were so popular, is because they were just like, oh, this is just like one of our mates going through a similar thing as us, and it's just fun and relaxed. And yeah, you look to your peers more in your teen years. So I just thought it would actually be a better way of yoga being spread. And my dream for it was to have like football uh, team captains, or I'm not sure on the exact terminology, but for them to train and then deliver yoga to their football groups. So yeah, that's how it all kind of got started with that.
It sounds like an amazing idea as well, just to copy and paste into all sports environments for coaches to use their students, their young athletes as peer coaches in those environments. It makes perfect sense when we talk about it in this abstract way. From my personal experiences, I found yoga to be very self affirming. You gain more trust in your body and you realise what it can do. Do you think that that helps build a greater level of self confidence in young people?
Yeah, definitely. It really does help. For for me, I struggled with my confidence quite a lot because of the impact of bullying. And how I found yoga to help me with my confidence is through positive affirmations. So when you're doing mindfulness, you notice how we can be really quite unkind to ourselves. You know, our thoughts can tell us all sorts of horrible things, and so you notice that, and then you slowly start to replace that in time with more positive affirmations like, I believe I'm worthy of love, and I am enough, and I am good, and then you just start to replace those thoughts. So every time you notice yourself doubting yourself, you replace it with your affirmation. And then when you do that enough times, that then starts rippling out. Our thoughts become our words become our behavior, and then that forms our habits and the way that we go out and live our life. And the same with that, I think, applies in education in school. So I always struggled with maths at school as well, and just had this running belief of I'll never be good at maths, so really what's the point in trying? It's a very typical thing that you hear if you talk to lots of young people. They say, oh, I don't really like that, oh, not good at it, oh, don't really bother. But if you think that, you're not really ever going to get a different outcome to that. And so this is where I think in education we should be teaching people about our mind, about neuroplasticity, about how we can change our thoughts, that our minds are not these rigid things. It's like a muscle. Like if you work out at the gym, your muscles get bigger and you feel stronger, and our minds are the same. And I find it surprising that that isn't taught, because I think that could be a really transformative thing for young people to sort of overcoming those barriers. Because if you suddenly start believing that you can be good at something, that if you try and open your mind to it, then you're more open to learning. um and I
To Go on, go
I
on.
was just going to say that with that, I think it's also important to recognize that to get to that place, you need to be like fairly regulated in terms of your nervous system. Um, that often if you say that to someone, it will just land on closed ears because, but you know, they might be going through quite a lot of stress, or maybe they've got unresolved trauma and things like that. So that's where I think a physical yoga practice and breath work can really help regulate someone so that then they can be in a relaxed, open state to then start to do some of that deeper work.
So, to coin a Gen Z phrase, I guess we're trying to microdose yoga now. For teachers and coaches who are in classroom environments or sports environments, what are the small things that they can learn and bring into their sessions with other sports that you think will have either immediate or wider long-term benefits?
That's a really good question. I think the power of breath is something that's so simple and quick to learn and something that absolutely everyone can do. So I think that would definitely be a great one to focus on. And the amazing thing with your breath is you can actually co-regulate as well. So I've talked about how you can regulate yourself a little bit with your breath, but let's say you're having a challenging moment in the classroom or in your coaching session, it's not going to plan, you're feeling a bit out of control. And so, quite a traditional approach to regaining the control is to maybe say stop or raise your voice a bit or, you know, come in with some discipline. But you could also think about using co-regulation. So in that moment, just take some breaths yourself. Notice that maybe you've got a bit of fear of, oh, this isn't going to plan. And then use that power of your breath to help calm other people. So let that ripple out. Or maybe even it's just giving that little bit of extra headspace to yourself as you relax. You might then get a bit more creative and playful in your thinking and think, right, how can I meet these people? How can I meet them where they're at? And how can we go forward in this session in a more positive way? So just giving yourself that bit of extra space. Yeah, that would be my tip for microdosing, is just keep practicing breath and trying to think about co-regulation.
Robin, this has been the most wonderful conversation. I've certainly found it very relaxing this morning. So thank you so much for joining us, and namaste, I guess we should probably say at the end here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
It's been lovely to chat to you.
And thank you at home for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way on Facebook and Instagram.